Have you ever thought about the insane legacy that Yugi's deck has left behind? Like, do you realize how many different decks have spawned from Yugi's one deck throughout the anime? I mean, let's be honest here. The original Yu-Gi-Oh series, it sells. Nostalgia is a hell of a thing, and Konami wants to milk that well dry for as much as it has to give. And that's okay with me personally. Obviously, make new stuff, of course, but you know, revamping, reviving old cards into the modern day, I'm all for it. Now, Yugi's deck, throughout the course of the anime series, well, it did go through some minor changes, little bits added to it here and there, but for the most part, the deck, it was kind of just a mishmash of cards. This is old school Yu-Gi-Oh after all. Archetypes and synergy, well, they barely existed back then. So Yugi's deck largely consisted of just a bunch of iconic monsters that have absolutely nothing to do with each other, just smushed together in a single deck. Like, what does Dark Magician, Summon Skull, Gaia the Fierce Knight, and Buster Blader have to do with each other? Nothing really. The only thing that ties them all together is that they are a part of Yugi's deck. Now, are you ready to have your mind blown? This is Yugi's deck for the years 2000 to 2004. And these are Yugi's decks 20 years later, all extracted from that one deck. His deck has grown into 18 different decks, and I guarantee you, there will be more in the future. Basically what's happened is each iconic monster in Yugi's deck has been spun off into their own archetype and essentially their own deck. Meaning nowadays, there isn't really a Yugi deck per se. Think the Yugi starter deck that had a bunch of these iconic monsters all together in one deck. That was a Yugi deck. Nowadays, it's what flavor of Yugi deck would you like to play? To make sure I'm not exaggerating, how about we go through each of the flavors of Yugi's decks that you can play in the modern day? Starting with the easy one, the Dark Magician deck. Yes, of course, how could Yugi's ace monster not have its own spin-off cards? And it's got a lot of them. It's a popular monster. With its expansion into a full Dark Magician deck, we get a lot of new cards, new monsters, new upgraded forms, new extra deck versions of the cards, and of course, loads of spells and traps. Picking 5 cards off the top of my head just to show what we have now, we've got things like Dark Magic Circle, Magician's Rod, Eternal Soul, Illusion of Chaos, and Palladium Oracle Mahad. In fact, I have a full video of all the Dark Magician monsters right here. That's a really good point. Not only is Konami trying to milk the original series dry for all it's worth, I think I might be trying to do it too. So I think it would be fun to see how many Yugi deck flavor spin-offs I have made videos for as well. Let's see how many we go through. So Dark Magician, I've done a video on it. Let's see how many more of those we've got. Dark Magician Girl deck. While the Dark Magician Girl is a spin-off of the Dark Magician, well, Dark Magician Girl is so popular, it had to have its own unique deck centered around it. And it does. We have the new fruit-flavored Magician Girls. What fruit do you like? They have one of those. Something I didn't know about, there's actually a Palladium Oracle Mana card now as well. I don't know if it's officially out or available anywhere, but that's pretty cool. We also have cards like Dark Burning Attack, and because Dark Magician Girl is so heavily tied to the Dark Magician and vice versa, we also have some cards that are part of the Dark Magician archetype and part of the Magician Girl archetype as well. Good example of that would be the Dark Magicians. And there's some other cards that give you boosts if there's a Dark Magician Girl on the field as well. So you can actually mix those two together. So you could have a Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl deck as another deck as well, Magician's deck. But I think that might be a bit too much. We'll just keep them as 2 separate decks for now. But yeah, that's the Dark Magician Girls, and guess what? I have a video for them as well. Let's see how many more of those we got. Kuriboh deck. Yugi's ever-faithful spirit companion. What did this monster do in the series? Well, it would tank an attack, discard this card, stop an attack from happening. You could also use cards like Multiply to make it fill the field and everything. So what did they do? They made a full deck of it. We have the Kuriboh brothers, we have that fused form, Kuribabylon. We have the 1 million different variations of Kuriboh itself. All you do, you pick an archetype, Galaxy Eyes, throw Kuriboh on it, Galaxy Kuriboh. You can do that for anything. What's the most recent one? I think it's a Flame Swordsman Kuriboh. It just applies to everything. However, the best out-of-pocket wing card you can get for Kuriboh, I think, is Wing Kuriboh level 10 with Transcendent Wings. just cool cards, but yeah, there's a full deck of them, and I've made a video of them. So yeah, yeah, Kuriboh as well. Lackluster Soldier deck. When Yugi combined the powers of light and darkness together and smushed them through ritual by using, I've done a whole video on this, spoilers already. I think it's with Gaia the Fierce Knight infused with light and darkness, you get the Blackluster Soldier. There's a full deck of it now. Iconic monsters in this archetype are BLS, the legendary swordsman, the BLS envoy cards, BLS Soldier of Chaos. There's the Little Knight forms as well of them, and in fact, quite a lot more that you can learn about in this video right here. Oh god, what have I become? Gaia the Fierce Knight and Curse of Dragon decks. Remember Gaia the Fierce Knight and Curse of Dragon? We used them, I think, separately at first and then mushed them together to make Gaia the Dragon Champion. It's a cool monster. I'm pretty sure he launched it at a castle for an episode. Well, it's got a whole new deck now. Lots of new fusions in this deck. We've got Sky Galloping Gaia, Gaia the Magical Knight. I think there's a Magical Knight of something else as well. There's a Curse of Dragon, the Magician Knight. We've got cards like Spiral Fusion, Spiral Spear Strike, and just a whole other bunch of cards that you can see more of in this video right here. Buster Blader deck. Yugi played against Kaiba a lot throughout the series. It was his rival. Why did Kaiba play a lot of dragon decks? His best monster and ace card was a dragon. So what was the smartest thing that Yugi did? He put an anti-dragon card, an anti-Kaiba card in his deck, if you will. The Buster Blader. It gained attack every time there was a dragon on the field or in the graveyard or something like that. But regardless, it's got a whole new archetype now. In fact, the Buster Blader archetype has its own Buster Dragon now, which is, I don't know, it's just kind of cool. Got other cards like Buster Blader Dragon Destroyer, Protector Whelp, and some other broken support cards that let you get this out during the opponent's turn and just shuts them off from doing anything. I played this deck for a whole month, and I made a video of them. There's a tragic story behind the Buster Blader cards, so we'll definitely check that one out. Knights of Face deck. Do you remember Jack's Knight, Queen's Knight, King's Knight? All they really did in the anime series, apart from being pretty cool, I did like them, is it was just a way of getting 3 monsters on Yugi's side of the field, so he contribute all 3 to somebody's Egyptian god card, Slifer the Sky Dragon. They've got their own deck now. We've got cards like Arcana Extra Joker, Arcana Knight Joker, Arcana Triumph Joker, Face Card Fusion, and Joker Straight, and a bunch of other cards. And you can slide Slifer the Sky Dragon in this deck as well, and it works with some cards as well. And I also have a video on these guys as well. Check it out if you fancy. Egyptian God deck. Of course, how could we not include an Egyptian God deck? Yugi, to be fair, had Slifer first, and you can build just the Slifer deck, and then he got Obelisk, so he could build just an Obelisk deck as well, and same for Ra. So you could class this as 3 separate decks, which I think we're going to do, because there's the individual decks for each Egyptian god that you can build a deck around, and then you can try and play all 3 together and win that way. And I guess, even though it doesn't exist in the TCG, there's a card called Horikathy. It might be called Horictile or something in the TCG, but this is the fused form of it, so I guess you could play that in a merge deck if it existed. But yeah, Slifer pairs well with the Knights of Face. Obelisk cards have their own support cards now. Ra decks have a lot of cards to support them, but I think having these slime cards with them as well, it makes them into a proper deck and everything. And of course, they have a video on all of these. Illusion Chimera deck. Remember Gazelle, the King of Mythical Beasts, and Baphomet? Obviously, you could fuse them together to make Chimera. There's a full archetype now, and fun fact, a lot of the cards in the main deck for this archetype, they are a new type of card that exists. It's called a Illusion type. You know, like Spellcaster, Beast, and all that. It's just a new one called Illusion. We've got things like Chimera, the King of Phantom Beasts, Big Wing Baphomet, Gazelle, the King of Mythical Claws, Chimera Fusion, and so much more. And guess what? I don't have a video on them. I haven't made a video of them yet. But I'll make sure to fix that soon. Magnet Warrior deck. Do you remember the Magnet Warrior cards? They were pretty cool monsters. I think it was one of my first shiny cards that I ever had in Yu-Gi-Oh! Was Valkyrion, the Magnet Warrior. Such a cool monster. Anyway, they were too slow. We've got new and upgraded forms of them and their own deck. The Magnet Warriors have been converted into the 3 Electromagnet Warriors. Valkyrion has become Berserkion. We've also got cards like Magnet Field, Induction, Force, Reverse, and Conversion. And I have a video on them as well. Silent Magician and Silent Swordsman deck. Yes, they have decks now. And guess what? These two monsters right here, they had a child together, which is Silent Paladin. Don't you feel old now? But seriously, they've had some serious glow-ups with their cards, some absolutely amazing upgrades to their forms. And what I've noticed now, which is really cool, Silent Magician level 8, okay card. It's hard to get out. It's got an anime version of its artwork now. How cool is that? Oh, and I have a video of them. Gadget deck. Now, the gadgets were the cards that little Yugi brought to the final duel. I think they were to sort of replace the Magnet Warrior cards, since he went down a different route with his deck. Like a toy theme, really, was Yugi's deck. The idea behind them is just constant recursion. You normal summon red Gadget, it adds yellow Gadget, summon, adds green Gadget, gets red Gadget. You just recycle that as much as you want to get as many cards. I think that's the order you get them in anyway. But we've got new ones now, like Platinum, Gold, and Silver Gadgets. There's another monster called Boot Up Admiral Destroyer Dynamo, which I think is like a new boss monster for them. There's also some trap monsters you can use. You can smush the gadgets inside of it. And some of the gadgets as well work with the Ancient Gear archetype, weirdly enough. Some of the Gadgetron dragons. Do I have a video on the gadget monsters? You bet I do. But to be fair, this one's quite out of date. I need to upgrade this one. Shining Sarcophagus deck. Now, this is a really clever idea for a deck, and I hope they do more of it. So, all these different archetypes I'm talking about now, all these spin-offs of the old iconic cards, well, they're all going off and doing their separate things. They're maturing, they're leaving home, and we're sad to see them go, but we know they need to go off and do their thing. This archetype is what if they don't do that? What if I just keep them all together? That's what the Shining Sarcophagus is. It's basically all of the iconic cards that Yugi used in his final duel, all put together in a single deck. We've got Gandora, Dark Magician, the Gadgets, the Silent Monsters, Marshmallow, and even Summon Skull, all in a single deck. And don't get me started on the support cards. They're all references to things that happened in the final duel. It's super cool. Do I have a video on them? No. That's another one I need to do. Exodia Millennium deck. Now, I know Yugi only had Exodia for like one duel in the series, really, but it was enough to be a deck he used, and so an Exodia deck is something that he has branched off to in the future. But to be fair, the Exodia deck has multiple different forms now. I'm going to say there's like a pure Exodia version that's just about drawing the 5 pieces of Exodia, and we also have the Millennium version, which is a new archetype of cards that support a monster called Exodia Incarnate, but then you can use other Exodia cards inside of that as well. Some cards that we have inside of this is Exodia Incarnate itself. That's the big one. We have the Millennium cards too, and all the different versions of Exodia everywhere. There's so many different ones. Do I have a video on this archetype? You bet your ass I do, and this is one of my most popular archetype videos. Oh no, I remade it as well. Oh no, I'm looping back on myself. That, which is what Konami did. Konami's done that as well. They made Exodia support, and they're like, should we try this again? Should we make the Millennium archetype? History's repeating itself. Legendary Dragon deck. Do you remember Timaeus, Hermos, Critias? They have their own deck now. We have the fusion cards, the fusion monsters themselves, and obviously for this deck, it's about merging other bits of other decks together into this deck. So you need to merge a little bit of Dark Magician into it, maybe a little bit of Blue Eyes, a little bit of Red Eyes, if you want to get the full effect of it, basically. But there's a lot of different cards you can put into this one, and of course I've made a video of them. How could I not? Now there's only one more deck left, and just about makes the cut. Yugi technically took Red Eyes Black Dragon off Joey Wheeler for a little while, so a Red Eyes deck. Yeah, he only had it for a while, but there is a Red Eyes archetype now in the real world and everything, so a Red Eyes deck. Does the deck need more support? Absolutely. It needs to pick a lane and stick to it until that day comes, though. Still, that's another deck that Yugi's deck has technically spun off into. I don't know if we can count a Blue Eyes White Dragon deck, since he only ever took that card in the middle of duels. Like when he's dueling with Kaiba like is eliminated, he's like, all right, I'll take your Blue Eyes for a bit. But I guess you could say a Blue Eyes deck if you really wanted to. The question then becomes, do I think this is going to be the last of Yugi's decks splitting off into other decks? Absolutely not. No. Some examples of cards Yugi used but don't have a full deck of them yet made up are Celtic Guardian, Summon Skull, Gandora, Feral Imp, Winged Dragon Guardian of the Fortress, Beaver Warrior, Mystical Elf, Soldier of Stone, Big Shield Gardener, Archfiend of Gilfer, Watapon, Marshmallow, Komori Dragon, I guess it doesn't just have to be monsters as well. We could make a full deck, turn them into monsters as well if you want, of like Magic Cylinder, Mirror Force, Source Revealing Light, Berserker Soul. And there's a lot more. And I guess when things get really obscure, like 50 years down the line, we've used so many different cards. Like, what have we got left to take from Yugi's deck? You're like, let's go for the really obscure cards. Cards that were like shown for like one panel or something. I'm thinking of cards like Mushroom Man. Let's make a full deck of that. So yeah, what card that Yugi used would you like to see made into a full deck? Let me know in the comments section below. Should we do this video for another character? Kyber, how many different decks has he had spin off from his one deck? Same with Joey Wheeler as well. I guess we could look into it. Obviously, I mentioned a lot of different videos I've made videos of in this video, and here's 2 of them an example. But other than that, thank you all for watching. Catch you later.